So some of you may notice that while we were walking up Broadway, there were some plaques in the sidewalk. Who here has ever heard of a ticker tape parade? Nobody. There's probably a reason for that. They're few and far between nowadays. But back in the days when we had telegraphs sent across the wires to mark the stock numbers, they would come on these machines and they would make noises as they recorded the numbers. So it was tick, 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 tick. And they came on these little strips of paper. And after they were recorded and used, whenever there was a parade on Lower Broadway, usually to celebrate a foreign dignitary arriving in New York City or the winning of a great sport event, the workers of around Broadway would tear up the pieces of ticker tape, the little pieces of paper that the stocks were recorded on, and throw them out the window and basically make confetti out of them. So the first ticker tape parade that we ever had in New York City was for the dedication of the Statue of Liberty in 1886, and then we skipped a whole bunch of years. And then it was in 1928 to celebrate Charles Lindbergh successfully flying the Atlantic Ocean solo. And then, like I said, we had a lot of foreign dignitaries arriving through some parades. Whoa, welcome, it's New York City, we love you. Unfortunately, in 1960, we had a little assassination of John F. Kennedy, and so that put a halt to that. Today, it's mostly to celebrate sports teams. The last one we had was when the Giants, won the Super Bowl in February 2012. And each one is recorded in the sidewalk, and they're consecutive. So you can actually march up Broadway. It's called the Canyon of Heroes, which, yes, officially makes the Giants heroes of the United States. Just saying. Right now, we are standing in the graveyard of Trinity Church. Now, Trinity Church is the oldest and yet not oldest church in Manhattan. I'll tell you why. So this was the first church built on the island of Manhattan, in the city of New York. 1697 is when it was built. And this lovely spire was the tallest in New York City. It was actually what announced that you had arrived in New York City. Before, obviously, we had a Statue of Liberty, you could see this gorgeous spire for miles ahead. So this was a part of the iconic skyline of New York before we had an iconic skyline of New York. Now, like I said, the first one was built in 1697. That's before our independence, right? So in order to build a church on the colony of New York, we actually had to write a letter to the King of England and ask permission on which to build a church on his property. And he was really nice and he said yes. So he gave us 25 acres of land on which to build a church. Then we got, we had this little Revolutionary War. England was no longer. So this was no longer in England's hands. Anybody want to guess as to who it belonged to? Yes, you are correct. It belongs to the church. So 25 surrounding acres of church land. Basically, the buildings that you see surrounding the church are sitting on what used to be church land, which means that they pay rent to Trinity Church, which gives them an income of approximately $40 million a year. So let that be a lesson to you. Buy big and buy early, right? Unfortunately, as I said, this is not the oldest church. This church burned down in the Revolutionary War fire in 1776, and then they rebuilt it again. Unfortunately, not very well, because there was a blizzard, and that collapsed the roof. So this church actually dates to 1846. So this is the third Trinity Church, and they built it in as close style as they could, but that's what makes it the oldest and yet not oldest church in Manhattan. This graveyard is actually very significant as well. It's the oldest graveyard in Manhattan. The oldest grave actually dates to 1681. And there are a couple famous people buried in this graveyard. Number one is Alexander Hamilton. You can't see him from here, but it's a lovely pyramid sort of, what's the word, monument? Mausoleum? Not right, but anyway, something along that. It's a lovely stone. For Alexander Hamilton, he is the founder of the Bank of New York, which is considered the foundation of the modern banking system, and also one of the founding fathers, first Secretary of the Treasury. He's the dude on the $10 bill. So he's buried here. Also, William Bradford, who established the first printing press in New York City in 1653. You probably never heard of him, but I think that was a pretty good invention. And it was because of him that we were allowed to print flyers that inspired the revolution, if you think about that. And also Robert Fulton. That name should probably ring a bell because we've named everything Fulton this, Fulton that around New York City. Robert Fulton invented the steam engine. And his boats carried industry basically between New York and Albany. So although he wasn't actually a New Yorker, we buried him in Trinity Church to honor him and his invention. I guess one last thing I will add about Trinity Church, because I love this little detail. So when we rented this land from the King of England to build a church, it was payable by rent of 60 bushels of wheat a year, because obviously we didn't have any money. Cut to 1976, when Queen Elizabeth pays visit to New York City. New York City presented her a gift of back rent owed of 300 peppercorns, which I'm sure she took in English grace, but really was kind of a slap in the face. Not only is it like, I mean, a jar of peppercorns is probably more than 300 peppercorns, right? But I just love it. She gave her 300 peppercorns of back rent owed, and she probably was, ha 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 ha, and inside she's thinking, I really want to kill her, right? I would think so. Anyway, let's continue over across Wall Street and see some more cool stuff.